Today, I want to talk about purpose. But I'm not here to give you the standard commencement about finding your purpose. We're millennials. We try to do that instinctively. Instead, I'm here to tell you that finding your purpose isn't enough. The challenge for our generation is to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. One of my favorite stories is when JFK went to go visit the NASA Space Center, and he saw a janitor holding a broom, and he asked him what he was doing, and the janitor replied, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." Purpose is that feeling that you are a part of something bigger than yourself, that you are needed, and that you have something better ahead to work for. Purpose is what creates true happiness. I remember that night I launched Facebook from that little dorm in Kirkland House. I went to Noakes with my friend KX, and I remember telling him clearly that I was excited to help connect the Harvard community, but one day someone would connect the whole world. The thing is, it never even occurred to me that that someone might be us. We were just college kids. We didn't know anything about that. There were all these great big technology companies with all these resources, and I just assumed one of them would do it. But this idea was so clear to us that all people want to connect. So we just kept working on it, day after day after day. And I know that a lot of you are going to have your own stories just like this. A change in the world that seems so clear that you are sure someone else is going to do it. But they're not. You will. But it's not enough to have that purpose yourself. You also have to create a sense of purpose for others. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, can I really do this? Well, remember when I told you about that class I taught at the Boys and Girls Club? One day after class, I was talking to my students about going to college, and one of my top students raised his hand and said that he wasn't sure he could go to college because he's undocumented. He wasn't sure if they'd take him. Last year, I took him out to breakfast for his birthday, and I wanted to get him a gift, so I asked him what he wanted, and he just started talking about struggles that he saw other students in his class facing, and finally he said, "You know, I'd really just like a book on social justice." I was blown away. Here is a young guy who has every reason to be cynical. He wasn't sure if the country he calls home, the only one he's known, was going to deny him his dream of going to college. But he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't even thinking of himself. He has a greater sense of purpose, and he's going to bring people along with him. It says something about our situation today that I can't even say his name because I don't want to put him at risk. But if a high school senior who doesn't know what the future holds for him can do his part to move the world forward, then we owe it to the world to do our part too.
What I learned is that I don't have to know all the answers, and if I don't have to pretend that I do. The opportunity to ask others for help and admit when we don't know things, and even admit when we make mistakes, means that people will rush to our aid and will be there to help us. If we claim we know all the answers, if we hide the mistakes we make, then people will think things are fine, and so they'll leave us alone. And it's not that people don't want to help us, it's that they don't know when they can.
We put this sort of slogan, I prefer brutal honesty to hypocritical politeness, on our website because it's a real disservice to people. You don't have to be offensive to be honest. When I don't like somebody, I can get offensive to, but generally you can be constructive and very honest, and I prefer that brutal honesty because it serves a purpose. The receiver can do something about it if it's a constructive criticism. If you get hypocritical politeness, you might lose a lot. So again, it's about having enough confidence to say the other person will eventually appreciate it. And that slogan came after I was working on a company with another major venture firm, and I didn't believe their plan would work. They had $45–50 million in the bank account, so everybody was comfortable, too comfortable in my view. I talked to the founders why it wouldn't work. What my concerns were, the other VCs agreed with me in the board meeting, said all these polite things. So 40 engineers wasted 3 or 4 years of their life because nobody was willing to tell them the honest truth about what they really thought. And I swore I would never let anybody waste their life, at least give them the best advice I had to give and tell them I may be wrong, but I'm not gonna say something I don't believe in. I just won't. And that's extremely valuable to the other thing. But to be honest, look, there are situations it offends people, and I offend people often. But it helps them if they're really introspective. That founder, by the way, in that company called me 4 years later after this company got sold for $3 million, 4 years later. Sad story. And he called me a year after that, said, I only want to work with you on my next venture because I wish somebody had told me.
Where I was like, oh, you're such a risk taker. I'm like, I hate risk, man. I'm terrified. And literally, it is terrifying, taking that first step. For me, it was easier because I got fired, but, it's about preparation. We all go through this process, and tell me what you think, Chase. I mean, where you've got the idea, right? And you get that feeling in your stomach, and you get all excited, oh my God, then you talk to a friend. And the friend goes, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I never heard of anything like that. I'd buy that, right? And then you talk to some other people, and then you do the Google search, right?
Anybody else out there?
Is anybody else doing this? And you try 50 different ways. No one's out there. Well, the first thing I'll tell you is, just because you don't see it on Google doesn't mean 100 companies haven't gone out of business doing the same thing, right? It may not be out. There's a saying in basketball, you're open for a reason, which means you can't shoot, so they're not guarding you, right? It hasn't been done for a reason because every company who's tried it has gone out of business. So the one thing I would tell you is be careful, but once you get past that stage, then what I always tell people is, one, is it something you love to do, right?
That's so true, because it's going to get hard.
Like, if you're really hard,
it's going to get hard. And if you don't love what you're doing, then it's like that. When shit gets hard, that's when you're going to like, oh man, I'm going to fall in the towel.
Right, because you don't know, right? And you don't have a sense for it. And I'm a real believer that each and every one of us has something we're good at, right? Sure. And you've got to figure out, is this something you're good at? I've always been good at selling. I found out I wasn't into computers when I was a kid. Then I found out when I started to teach myself how to code, it was like, oh, I like this, right? And I literally would sit there writing software, and I think, okay, I've been working 2 hours, I better get something to eat, and it's been 24 hours, It's just like, what the f***, 24 hours? I mean, okay.
That tells you you're clued in. And it's not just what you care about, it's not just passion, because the circle's overlapping passion and aptitude, right? You want to be good at something. Just because you love basketball
doesn't mean I'm going to be any good at it, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can have fun at it, but if you're trying to make a business, a life, a living, then you should.
Yeah, and I always say, don't follow your passion, follow your effort. Right? So you might think you're passionate about playing basketball, playing the guitar, drawing, design, whatever, but where you spend your time is your better indicator, because that's typically what you're good at. And nobody ever quits anything they're good at.
For sure.
When you're good at something, you tend to want to get better.
Another would be, and I don't know if you've ever had any interaction with Kyle Maynard. Kyle Maynard's a fascinating guy. He was born a congenital quad amputee, so he has his arms and before the elbows and his legs before the knees. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, he is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, like collegiate wrestling, and is the first person to ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro without prosthetics. So he military crawled the entire mountain. He's such a stud. And he was taught by a CEO at one point. The CEO used this for hiring, but you can use it for anything. This particular CEO, very successful, would have his current employees rank prospective employees from 1 to 10. And that's not interesting by itself. His rule was you can't use 7. So I want you to rank them from 1 to 10. You can't answer 7. And what ends up being so beautiful about that, and leveraged is that 7 is a safe number. It's kind of like the non-offensive Switzerland of answers. It's not committal, it's not too bad, so you can wiggle out of it. Whereas if you're choosing a 6, that's barely passing. That's not good. If it's an 8, you're indicating you're pretty stoked, like you're vouching.
He forced them to make a decision.
Exactly. So you can
I love it.
1 to 10, no 7. And so I've used that, and Kyle has used it for, say, invitations
decisions, right?
for anything, invitation to conferences, invitations to coffee, whatever it might be. It's like, all right,
Decisions in life.
decisions in life.